Hi, everyone. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U, and today we're going to be talking about one of the best opening dialogue scenes out there. My hope is that you had a chance to take a look at it, to watch it again. I'm sure you've seen it before, but today we're going to look deeper. And this is when somebody writes something that's really incredible. It almost always there's a surface level, there's what the audience perceives, and then there are many, many things beneath the surface. So today we're going to be looking beneath the surface on this particular scene. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Now, here's the steps. First, we're going to be talking about the structure of this dialogue scene, and it's the entire scene, start to finish, is dialogue, right? Other than maybe them touching their food or their glasses and drinking or something like that, I don't think there's a single action in this scene. She gets up and walks off at the end. I guess you could call that the action. But it's completely dialogue, start to finish. And the dialogue itself does some absolutely amazing things. We're going to talk about how you express character through dialogue, and then how dialogue can keep us engaged. Now, let me just say before we go too far here, I'm not saying that every scene should be a dialogue scene all the way through. This is something that you do at certain moments, right? There are certain times where if you have a complete dialogue scene start to finish, especially when it's like a monologue from a character where we desperately want to know something about them, where it works, right? But this is the opening scene. So this dialogue had to be especially good. And then we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the upcoming class called Creative Mastery that is all about how do you double the quality of the best writing you've ever done. And this, when we get to it, I'll tell you what created it, because there was this whole mystery that occurred around it that completely changed how I thought about dialogue and especially about training somebody to be able to double the quality of their best writing. But we'll get to that. First, The Social Network, written by Aaron Sorkin. You guys probably know Aaron Sorkin from The West Wing, or, a whole bunch of different shows and movies that he's done. He's incredible at dialogue. It was based on a book called The Accidental Billionaires by Ben Mesrich. Hope I pronounced that correctly. The budget was $40 million. And I put these numbers up always just so you can get kind of an idea for how audiences respond here. The movie made $224 million, which is roughly 50 times its money. So that's a success from a box office perspective. But I would say this movie was a success from a bunch of other perspectives also, especially including the writing. So the big question, and this is the big question that I think you should be asking yourself all the time: how do you write at this level, right? Because if you're not asking yourself that question, if you're not thinking every time you watch a great movie, if you're not having that question, chances are you've kind of stagnated. And I'm not saying anything about anybody in particular, please no, but I think part of becoming great at anything is you are constantly looking for ways to become better. My guess is that's probably part of why you're here. So let's jump into it. The structure. Even in a dialogue scene, you need to know there's structure. And this is, a lot of times, like we're talking about monologues, people will say, well, they're just telling a story. And it's like, right, they're telling a story. So there's structure there. Every scene you have has some kind of structure in it. But let's keep going. In this case, well, in every one of these cases, there's a scene arc. There's escalation. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There are setups and payoffs. So we will take a look at some of those, and we'll also look at some of what's beneath the surface in this situation. The scene arc. It starts as a date and it ends as a breakup, right? So something has happened here that's pretty big, right? In the beginning, they're dating. At one point, he even says, we're dating. And it ends as a breakup that actually throws Mark into a spiral and causes him to make some major changes in his life. The escalation goes from chatting to insults to the breakup. The midpoint is the conflict where she asks which final club is the easiest to get into, and he takes that as an insult, right? So just, again, go back and look at it from these perspectives, and you'll see this structure is pretty obvious once you look at it. The wound in this case, Mark being dumped. I don't know how many dates they've been on. It appears to me like they're in the third or fourth date range or something like that. So he's kind of being dumped early in what he thought was a relationship. The setup, this scene sets up Mark's reaction, which is to go back and create the hot versus not. Actually, he goes back and he first trashes Erica on whatever social media they had at that time. And then he creates the hot versus not program, launches it to all of Harvard, which actually makes him famous at Harvard. And that breakup causes him to embark on this journey that ultimately ends up creating the biggest social network ever, at that point, at least. So now let's look at the dialogue. This dialogue expresses character. Let me give you a couple of ways, and then I'll show you examples. We see the traits of these characters. They show up. We see their motivations. We see at least one character who ends up with a wound that, according to the movie, ends up following him the rest of his life and being part of his life. There's banter, and this is something that Aaron Sorkin is amazing at, is creating banter. So in this case, there's friendly banter, then there's attack, counterattack. There's entertainment, right? We have conflict, and we have an emotional roller coaster that happens pretty much with Mark having almost no idea what's really going on. He's really, really smart and really, really not smart. So let's look at him. So Mark, as a character, his traits, he's brilliant. That shows up here. He's obsessed, clearly shows up here. He's obsessed with this whole final clubs thing. He is abrasive. He has a major chip on his shoulder. He is completely oblivious to other people's feelings. Like, I think he has no idea where this is going. And if you go watch it and you watch it just from her perspective, it's clear in the beginning that she likes him and it looks like they're together to some degree. But almost everything he says reduces her desire to be in the relationship and creates a desire to exit the relationship. But he's oblivious to it. He has no idea. He has a motivation that shows up. He hopes to be accepted by the final clubs, right? And that motivation, if you get down to it, is probably a status-oriented motivation, maybe a power-oriented motivation, something like that. He also has a fear that he won't get that lifestyle. And there are some fears underneath that if I was doing a complete character profile, I would list those instead. And he has a deep, deep need, which I would say is what drives him He desperately needs to prove he is better than everyone else. So now, none of this is explained during this scene. If you watch the rest of the movie, you will see different parts of this. You'll see actual times that there's conversations about almost every one of these things. But what really is happening is we're seeing it in action. Oh, she does say he has OCD, by the way. Let's take a look at how he talks. He's talking down to her, right? He says, at one point he says, "Are you like whatever, delusional?" And then another time he says, "That was cryptic. So you do speak in code, right?" He said, "You might want to be a little more supportive." And when he says it, he's not saying it in kind of a kind way. He's giving her an instruction. And then we get this whole other thing, which I'll show you how it works later on. But if I get in, I'll be taking you to the events and the gatherings, and you'll be meeting a lot of people that you wouldn't normally get to meet, right? So he sees the relationship not as an equal thing. He sees it as him being absolutely superior. Now, Erica, let's look at some of her traits. I'd say she's confident. She speaks in a metaphoric way, so she sees things through metaphors. You'll see what I'm talking about in a little bit on that. She's also sarcastic, and she's a nice person. Now, there may be other ways to look at her, but I'm just coming straight from this scene. We only see her in one other scene, and it's too short to be able to discover much more depth. But this shows up pretty strong here. Here, let's look at some of her dialogue. Erica says, "Maybe, but you say two things at once, and I'm not sure which one I'm supposed to be aiming at." This is a metaphor. She's aiming at it, right? Like somebody's throwing an apple up in the air and she has to shoot it with an arrow. She says, "No, it's just since the beginning of this conversation's about Finals Club, I think I may have already missed a birthday." There's another metaphor. She says, "You're obsessed with Finals Clubs. You have Finals Club OCD, and you need to see someone who will prescribe some sort of medication." So this is another metaphor. She's actually saying something that's true. He does have some kind of OCD here on this, and he is obsessed with Finals Club, but she then takes it immediately to that metaphor. So if you look at it, if you really look at this scene, I would say Erica's dialogue is much more interesting. I think she has better dialogue. Now, he has dialogue that comes perfectly from who he is as a character and the deep, deep needs that he has. But hers are, I would have loved to have seen more of her in this movie just because of the kind of dialogue that she had. Mark says to her, "I want to be straightforward with you and tell you that I think you might want to be a little more supportive. If I get in, I'll be taking you to the events and the gatherings, and you'll meet a lot of people you wouldn't normally get to meet." Now, watch her response. First, she says, "You do that for me?" So this is her being sarcastic, right? And he says, "We're dating," which is, two things. One is he's declaring they are dating. But the second thing is he's saying, "Yeah, I would do that for you only because of this. I wouldn't do it for anyone else." But let's go further. So here's her response. "Okay, well, I want to try to be straightforward with you and let you know that we're not anymore." So she took his words and turned them into the opposite of the meaning that he thought they had. Now, this is something Aaron Sorkin is great at. He's great at creating circular dialogue, and you see it all the way through this. But he's also great at creating meaning and then changing the meaning and then changing it again. Let's go a little further here. She says, because it's exhausting. Dating you is like dating a stairmaster. Now, this is another one of her metaphors, but it's where she's coming from. Let's go a little further and let's finish this up. So I want you to see what this has done, this scene, and how it really kept us engaged. From the beginning, there was this opening hook, right? This is the first words of the movie. It's actually before we even see them. Did you know that there are more people in China with a genius IQ than all the people in the United States? So that was the opening hook. And you might look at that and go, well, he's talking about China, or it's like, so what, or that kind of thing. But he's talking about himself. You know, this is who he sees himself as, and he's talking about, you know, we find out that he scored a 1600 and all that kind of thing, right? He's absolutely perfect. Then we have circular dialogue. Mark's discussing 3 subjects at once, and he keeps circling back to them. We also saw her use circular dialogue, starting with something he said and circling back to it and giving it a deeper meaning. We have irony built into this. Mark is trying to prove that he's better than everyone, but is getting trashed by doing it. And you could look at it a different way. He's trying to prove he's better than everyone and ends up being the only one sitting there because, well, you know, he just got dumped. And then there's metaphors, which I pointed out. I didn't know which I'm supposed to be aiming at. I missed a birthday, Final Club OCD, dating a stairmaster, right? So, you know, another interesting form of dialogue. There are insults. Are you like delusional? That was cryptic, so you speak in code. And at one point he says to her, you don't have to study. And she says, why don't I have to study? And he says, because you go to BU, right? So he's basically putting down everything that she's doing. You know, who would want to be in that relationship? And then subtext. She says, which of the finals club is easiest to get into? And equals in his mind that she doesn't think that he's the best. She's actually trying to find a way. She's interacting at that point like she's in a brainstorm session because that's the way he presented it. But it turns out, no, he's in a session called I'm Better Than Everyone, and you should already know that. So now, and finally, sarcasm. And we showed that multiple times. Concentrate on being the best you can be. She actually says she was being sarcastic. And then when he says he would take her to the final clubs, she says, you would do that for me? Now, let's now come to the very last line. And this is, if you want to call it, a turning point of the scene. So this final line actually was a turning point, the way the movie presented it, at a turning point in Mark's life. If you look at it, if she wouldn't have dumped him the way she did, he might not have gone out and done any of the other things he did. He might not have gone back and created and insulted her online and then created the hot versus not, and then become famous at Harvard because of that, and then been approached by what were their names, the Winklevoss brothers, and then stolen their version of Facebook and created his own, and become one of the richest people in the world if it wouldn't have been for this set of lines. Now, by the way, I don't know that this is what really happened, that these lines actually really happened. This is something that a writer did. So watch this. There's a setup that connects to his future. You are probably going to be a very successful computer person. right? This is what Mark wants to hear, right? It's who he sees himself as in the future. At that point, he has no idea about Facebook. He has nothing else going on. He sees himself as being this incredible genius who creates something that everybody loves, and he's a very successful computer person. So she started out by connecting with his future. Then she says, she makes a prediction. That's something that he has a fear about. But you're going to go through life thinking that girls don't like you because you're a nerd, right? Now, this is one of his fears, at least I would think. And it's her making a prediction about his future relationships and how he's going to feel about them based on how he's interacting with her. And then she says, and let's just, 3 popped up here, but let's just go with this one. This line that's very caring. And I want you to know from the bottom of my heart, that won't be true. Now, if she stopped right there and she left, I would say he would have felt pretty much okay. He would have been a little bit upset that the relationship ended. He would have questioned some of the things that happened and that kind of thing. But she said something nice at the end. I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that that won't be true. Wow. So one of his fears in life, she would have just made okay. But she doesn't stop there. She then finishes with this major twist and insult. It'll be because you're an asshole. So notice what this does. It's like it gets him involved in his future. It points to his future. It points to a fear he has. It tells him that that fear isn't true. And then it tells him it's worse than that. Now, if you think about the way that was designed and the way that was written, it is designed to set a human being up and either crush them or send them on a journey. So the impact of this was, first, it ended the relationship. Then it predicted his future failures, because basically he now knows every relationship he's going to have, the person on the other side of the table is going to think he's an asshole. And it had her win this round. And if you believe any of the things that they've said about Mark Zuckerberg, one of the things that has been said many times is that he's a narcissist. So for a narcissist, for somebody else to win the round, they absolutely have to prove themselves superior, which is what he was in when he went back and did everything he did from that point on, including everything you see in the lawsuits, right? So this, by the way, I would say was absolutely great writing in a single scene that had 0 action in it, that had no other meaning from any place else, only 2 characters. I think it was absolutely incredible. And again, something we can learn from. Now, that brings us to the real question. My guess is that you are here first because there was something about that scene that you found, impactful, something that you thought was very interesting. Maybe you could learn something and apply it to your own writing. At the same time, I'm guessing that the other part is that you're actually here because you want to become a better writer, right? And you want to know how can you make it natural for you to be able to write at this level? Because this guy, Aaron Sorkin, while he's been doing this for a long, long time, at some point he was where you are. At some point he had only written his first script or his second or his third, right? And somewhere along the way, he learned how to write this way and how to create this way. And I'm not talking just about dialogue. I'm talking about everything you write in a screenplay. So let me just tell you a quick story here, because I had a guy call me up one day who asked me a question that kind of sent me into wondering what would really be possible. So here was his question. He said, he called up and he said, actually, let me back up for a second. He said, Hal, this is a guy named Richard. He'd taken a bunch of our classes. He said, Hal, a producer wants to option my script. And I was like, Richard, congratulations. Wow, that's amazing, man. And he says, no, it's not. And I said, why not? And he goes, because he says he'll option my script if I double the quality of the writing. Now, he was a good writer. He had been at least a semifinalist in some of the big contests. He had been a finalist in a small contest with that script. So it was pretty well written. And I said, okay, he wants you to double the quality. And he said, how do you do that? How do you double the quality of your best writing? And I went, wow, that's a great question. So I started writing it down on my pad of paper. And he goes, no, it's not a question. He says, it's not possible. And I said, I don't know, Richard. Let me think about that. Now, you guys know me. What I've been doing for the last 40 years is designing training programs, first for major corporations and now for screenwriters. But as soon as he asked that question, I started imagining what would be possible. How could you do that? How could you double the quality of your very best writing, right? And it was like, that was fascinating to me. Richard kept arguing. He kept telling me it wasn't possible. And I finally said, here, let me think about it for a couple of days and I will call you back. So for 3 days, I wrote up 3 different versions and finally came up with something I thought might work. And I called Richard and I said, here, if you're willing to do this, I think I've solved this. I think I have at least a version that could work. I'll walk you through the process. So I spent 10 days with Richard, walking him through how to double the quality of his best writing. And we worked with a bunch of scenes in his script. During that period of time, we figured out the model. And I got together a development team. We created this thing, right? This question, in my opinion, was one of those things that kind of changed my life, in that it gave me this whole different way of thinking. You could write something that's absolutely amazing, and then you could make it significantly better. Now, that took me and ultimately caused us to create this class. It's called Creative Mastery, and it has 2 purposes. The first one is to double the quality of your best writing, right? And to give you not only a model, but to make you proficient at that. If you just look at some of the things that have happened, we've had lots and lots of writers be optioned by producers because of this. But we've also had writers win the Nickel Fellowship. We've had them win the grand prize at Page. We've had them win first place at Final Draft Big Break Contest. And a bunch that have landed managers and made deals with producers who have gone through this program. And the reason why that's significant is because this program specifically gave them the tools to be able to take things to a different level. And when it came to working with managers and producers, this program gave them the second outcome, which was the ability to deal with notes, right? When a producer comes back to you and says, hey, we need to change this, how could you, even if you look at it at the beginning and go, I don't want to change that. I love that scene. How could you take their note and make that scene significantly better and take it to a whole new level, all because you have a set of strategies for dealing with that, right? Because that's what this whole thing is about. Now, I'll just tell you a couple of things about this class. I'm not going to give you the how it works and that kind of thing. You will learn that inside. It's a proprietary process. It took us, by the time we were done, it took us almost 6 months to develop it and get it to where it worked for everyone. it will change everything about your writing. As in, it will take whatever you already know, and it'll take every bit of it to a completely new level. So you take this class if you want to be writing at a significantly higher level. If you see yourself working with producers, agents, and managers in the future, because it will give you the exact tools to be able to take notes and stand out. At one point, I was doing a series of interviews, and this $50 million producer sat down next to me. He's done a whole series of movies that were 50 million. I'd never met him before, but I recognized his name as soon as he said it. And I said, wow, glad to meet you. And he says, I am glad to meet you. He says, I have worked with 4 of your writers. And he said, they're amazing. And I was like, really? Now the audience was all just coming in and sitting down at that point. So I cuffed the mic and I said, what is it that you think was amazing about them? And he goes, you know what? He says, they can take notes better than anybody I've ever worked with. He says, no matter what I ask them to do, they can create it. That came from this. He told me who the 4 writers were. All 4 of them had been through this program. If you want to maintain control of your creative vision when you're working with producers, what that takes is being able to understand their notes, being so good at it that you actually can transcend what they're doing and find a better way, right? And if you want to be able to take notes and be the most confident and competent person in the room, this is the program that you want. So the structure of this class, it's a 2-month online class. During that period of time, you're going to master the double the quality model, and you will master the ability to take notes. So let me get out of the way here so that you can see this. The class starts on October 16th. And once that class starts, from that point on, you will be dramatically improving the quality of your writing with every lesson. By the time you're done with this, your writing will be night and day from where it was. We've had people go from being the worst writer in a writer's group to being the best writer by finishing this program. That's all it took. The normal price on it is $299. We've just come back from this writer's strike. We want you guys to be able to move forward and make something happen as fast as possible. So we're going to give it to you at a special we haven't done for 5 years. And that is, we're going to give it to you at half price. So here's the link. All you got to do is click that link, or if it's not clickable, just write it down. And you will get this program at $149.50. That is for the first 20 writers who sign up. So just write it down. It's bit.ly, bit.ly/quality-mastery. bit.ly, bit.ly/quality-mastery. And I promise you, on this program, it will shock you how much of a difference it makes in the quality of your writing. So if what you want to do is just make a major improvement, if you're even thinking about the possibility of being a truly successful writer who has movies made and those kinds of things, this will make a significant difference in your writing, but it will also make you so much more capable, so much more confident in dealing with producers, agents, and managers. So I hope you enjoyed today's meeting as we talked about this one scene. If you take a look at Aaron Sorkin's writing, you'll see that he actually has a lot of scenes that have this kind of quality in them. And they're absolutely worth analyzing and rethinking and watching and seeing what he did. There's also a whole bunch of other writers out there who write like this. Find those writers, analyze their work. But if you want the easiest way to double the quality of your best writing, come join us for this class. Listen, thank you guys for being here. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U, wishing you the absolute best in your writing. Bye-bye, everyone.